In episode 1, we went inside ADX Florence, the most isolated prison in America, where silence is the punishment. In episode 2, we covered La Sabaneta, a Venezuelan prison so out of control that inmates slaughtered each other by the hundreds while the government looked away. In episode 3, we went to Black Dolphin, Russia's end-of-the-line facility, where 700 of the world's most dangerous men will spend the rest of their lives under total suffocating control. Each of those was extreme in its own way. But episode 4 is different, because this time, the story isn't about a prison that was neglected or a prison designed to break you. This is the story of a prison that was taken over, completely, by a gang so powerful that they didn't just run the yard. They built a zoo inside the walls. This is Tocorón, and this is the Forgotten Archive, the Centro Penitenciario de Aragua. That's the official name, but everyone in Venezuela knows it simply as Tocorón, named after the small town in Aragua state where it sits, about 60 miles southwest of Caracas. On paper, it's a state prison, opened decades ago to house convicted criminals. Standard issue: walls, cells, guards, the usual. That's not what it became. What Tocorón became is one of the most extraordinary examples of state failure in modern Latin American history. Not because of a massacre, not because of a riot, but because, slowly and completely, the Venezuelan government lost control of this prison, and a criminal organization moved in, set up permanent headquarters, and built an empire from inside the walls. To understand how that happened, you need to understand Venezuela in the 2000s and 2010s. The country was unraveling. The economy was collapsing. Public institutions were hollowing out. Prisons were overcrowded, underfunded, and increasingly left to fend for themselves. Guards stopped showing up. Budgets dried up. The state's grip loosened. And into that vacuum stepped a man named Héctor Guerrero Flores, known to everyone as Niño Guerrero, the Kid. He was the leader of a gang called Tren de Aragua, and Tocorón was about to become their home base. Tren de Aragua started in Tocorón. That's not a metaphor. It literally began inside these walls, among inmates who organized themselves for protection, then for profit, then for power. By the mid-2000s, Niño Guerrero and Tren de Aragua didn't just control Tocorón, they owned it. Guards who remained on the payroll were either paid off, intimidated, or simply irrelevant. The Venezuelan prison service, such as it was, had effectively ceded the facility to the gang. From the outside, Tocorón still looked like a prison. Walls, fences, gates. The official signage was still there. But inside? Inside was something that no one who heard about it could quite believe until they saw it. Let me describe what journalists and authorities found when they eventually got a proper look inside Tocorón. There was a swimming pool, a full-size swimming pool built by inmates, maintained by inmates, used by gang members and their families during visits. There was a zoo, an actual zoo, with animals including a tiger, a lion, a deer, and various birds. Kept inside a maximum security prison, fed and cared for by the people running the facility, which was not the Venezuelan government. There was a nightclub, with a DJ booth, lighting rigs, and a bar. Inmates and visitors would party there on weekends. Music, dancing, alcohol. There was a roller coaster, a small one, but a roller coaster nonetheless. Built inside the prison walls for the children of inmates and gang members who came to visit. There were restaurants, shops, a barber, a gym with actual equipment. Families of inmates didn't just visit, they moved in. Partners, children, extended family, living semi-permanently inside the complex in structures that had been built or modified over the years. This wasn't a prison anymore. It was a self-governing community, a city inside a city, built, funded, and controlled entirely by Tren de Aragua, and it was being run as a criminal headquarters. From Tocorón, Tren de Aragua ran extortion networks across Venezuela. They controlled smuggling routes. They taxed businesses in surrounding towns. They recruited from inside the prison and deployed members across the country. The prison phone lines, which should have been monitored or restricted, were used openly to coordinate operations on the outside. Members inside could communicate with members on the street in real time. They were running a cartel from behind bars, and the bars weren't really stopping them from doing anything. At its height, Tren de Aragua was considered one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Venezuela, and Tocorón was their boardroom. Niño Guerrero held meetings inside the prison. He received visitors. He issued orders. He managed finances. By all accounts, he lived relatively comfortably because he had built the kind of environment where comfort was possible if you were at the top of the structure. For everyone else inside, inmates who weren't part of the gang or who were lower in the hierarchy, life was very different. Extortion was the norm. If you wanted protection, you paid. If you wanted to eat properly, you paid. If you wanted to use a phone, you paid. The gang taxed everything and everyone within those walls. Violence was always present. Not the chaotic, uncontrolled slaughter of La Sabaneta. This was more calculated. Violence was a tool of enforcement, a reminder of who was in charge. You stepped out of line, and there were consequences. Everyone inside knew that. The Venezuelan government wasn't blind to what was happening. There were reports, investigations, official acknowledgments that the situation in prisons like Tocorón had deteriorated badly. But for years, the government's approach was essentially to leave it alone. A combination of political instability, resource shortages, and what critics described as deliberate indifference meant that no serious attempt was made to retake the facility. Some analysts argued it was even convenient that keeping violent criminals concentrated inside a self-managing compound, however chaotic, was preferable to whatever would happen if the state tried to forcibly dismantle it. Others pointed to credible reports of corruption reaching far beyond the prison walls, that Tren de Aragua's influence had extended into local government, law enforcement, and potentially further up the chain. Whatever the reason, for years the Venezuelan state essentially accepted that Tocorón was not its territory. That changed in September 2023. The Venezuelan government, under Nicolás Maduro, launched a major military operation to retake Tocorón. Thousands of security personnel, soldiers, police, special forces, surrounded and entered the facility in a coordinated assault. What they found confirmed everything that had been reported for years. The pool, the zoo, the nightclub, the shops, structures built over decades of unchecked gang control. Over 1,600 people were inside at the time of the raid. Many were arrested or transferred. The animals were removed, the structures were documented. But here's the part that matters. Niño Guerrero was not there. Neither were most of Tren de Aragua's senior leadership. They had been tipped off, or had simply anticipated that the operation was coming, and had fled. The Venezuelan government had retaken the building, but not the organization. And Tren de Aragua, already expanding beyond Venezuela's borders in the years prior, simply kept growing. In the months and years following the Tocorón raid, Tren de Aragua emerged as one of the most talked about criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. They were documented in Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Chile. Then further, in the United States, where federal law enforcement began tracking their activity in cities, including New York, Miami, Chicago, and Denver. In 2024, the gang was formally designated a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. government. A gang that started in a Venezuelan prison, that built a zoo and a nightclub inside those walls, that ran a criminal empire from behind bars for years, now operating across an entire continent. The raid on Tocorón didn't end Tren de Aragua. If anything, it scattered them. And a scattered organization is, in some ways, harder to fight than a concentrated one. So what is the lesson of Tocorón? It's not just about Venezuela, or about one gang, or about one badly run prison. It's about what happens when institutions fail completely, when the people responsible for maintaining order simply stop showing up, whether out of corruption, incompetence, or calculated indifference. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so do criminal organizations. When the state steps back, someone else steps forward. In La Sabaneta, it was chaos. In Tocorón, it was something more organized, and in some ways, more dangerous. Because organized power is harder to dismantle than chaos. A zoo, a nightclub, a roller coaster, built inside a prison, by people who were supposed to be locked away from the world. And the world let it happen for years. That's the Forgotten Archive. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Episodes 1 through 3 are all linked on screen now. ADX Florence, La Sabaneta, and Black Dolphin. If you haven't seen them, start from the beginning. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into the stories and places that don't make the front page. I'll see you in the next one.